Thank you, Jason. Nice to meet you all. Aryan Kabir, co-founder, CEO of GrayMatter Robotics. At GrayMatter Robotics, our mission is to build factories of the future today, empowering people, building a safer workplace, and accelerating our path towards building a more prosperous society. As part of our mission, we are in a very fortunate position to work with some amazing organizations and some amazing human beings. And we're very fortunate today to have like 3 of those people that we closely work with and share our journey with today with us. So I'd love to welcome to the stage Drew, Aaron, and Paul. Thank you, folks, for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. I think I'm going to let each of you introduce yourself. I think you'll do the justice. Yeah. So, Drew, you want to introduce yourself and introduce Riddell?
Sure. Drew Dixon, Director of Distribution Strategy at Riddell. Riddell is the largest football protective equipment manufacturer in the world. We make new football helmets, shoulder pads, uniforms, and we also recondition all that equipment as well on an annual basis. I've been with Riddell 11 years. Current role, have oversight for all logistics, purchasing, distribution, warehousing, and operations, special projects activities, which is where the robots fit in our facility.
Great. Aaron?
Aaron Lamberg, Director of Manufacturing for Pierce Manufacturing. I've been with the company for 19 years. We're one of the leaders in fire apparatus manufacturing, so we build fire trucks. Very cool mission that we have, providing those purpose-built vehicles for some of our most selfless people in society. So we're really working to solve a lot of the problems that Aryan already kind of shared with us a little bit. So I'm excited to talk to everybody today.
Awesome. Paul?
Yeah, Paul Dunphy. I'm president at International Aerospace Coatings. I've been with IAC for 15 years now. We're the world's largest aircraft painting company. So we paint about 700 aircraft a year at 19 different hangars, 10 different locations between the USA and Europe. We do that for brand names that are very familiar to you, the largest airlines in the world, the largest OEMs in the world. That process of stripping and repainting an airplane, we will do that in about 8 days. It's all entirely manual at this point in time. So needless to say, we're very interested in what Aryan does and trying to make our business a bit smarter and more efficient.
Great. By the way, a lot of us are very familiar with how manufacturing is done in automotive industries or electronics industries. On YouTube, online, on TV, we see all the Tesla factory videos and many other things. However, vast 90% of manufacturing outside of automotive, electronics, food and beverage, all of that, vast majority of those are done by people manually by hand. And we're going to share some photos and examples of how manufacturing is done today out in the world. One request we have is not to take any photos or videos of the screen. That will be showing some of the example from the facilities of Riddell, Pierce, and IAC. This stays, as Jason mentioned, just in this room. So with that said, Drew, I'd like you to tell us about how manufacturing is different at Riddell compared to, let's say, what we see at a Tesla factory.
Yeah, so what makes Riddell unique, particularly for our reconditioning business. So we sell new football helmets. A football helmet has a 10-year life, but then that helmet needs to be reconditioned at least every 2 years. Most customers recondition every year from a safety standpoint. So what we're doing in our facility in Cleveland, Ohio, we're making the new helmets, but then we're also reconditioning the helmets. And it's very much high mix, high volume. So we process annually between our 3 plants over 1.3 million helmets each year for reconditioning. We got 200 sales reps throughout the country. They go to the local high school. So we're going to go, Huntington Beach High School here in a few weeks once the season's over. Pick up all the helmets in the locker room, put them in a bag, and ship them to our facility. We recondition our helmets, our competitor helmets, and you don't really know what you're getting until you open that bag. It's like Christmas each year. You open the bag, it's 100 helmets. You have 10 of this size, 10 of this size, 10 of our competitors, and then we have to recondition it all, which we have to open it up, take all the parts out, Then we have to sand the helmets because we're going to ultimately repaint the helmets. We sand the helmet, wash all the parts, then repaint that helmet, put all the parts back in, inspect them, replace any bad parts, recertify it, and send it back out. A lot of different hands throughout the process. We currently have, at peak, about 600 employees in our facility, between a two-shift operation on this. So, and every hand is touching those helmets, throughout the process.
Aaron?
So as I mentioned before, Pierce Manufacturing, we build custom fire apparatus. So when I say custom, it truly is custom. All of the bells and whistles that you can imagine go into these trucks. So we are low volume, high mix manufacturing, which creates challenges in a traditional industrial automation. So due to the variation that we see, we cannot apply one solution to every one of our trucks. So as you can see on the images here, we have a lot of craftsmen and women who spend time building these trucks with their hands. So when you come in to buy a fire truck, you get to start with about 120,000 options, and you parse that down to design your truck. Every truck is designed specifically for that mission, for that fire department, based on their needs. Right now, we're facing historical backlogs. So you've probably seen some articles in the news talking about inquiries into the entire industry, which is one of our biggest challenges. So with that large backlog that we have, and some of the topics we talked about yesterday with the issues in the workforce and recruiting and being able to fill these jobs, we focused on, like many other manufacturers, automation. And it's really easy to talk about automation, but really hard to do, especially in high mix. So a few years back, we actually went to Automate Conference, which is something that we try to go to look for other innovations in the industry, with a mission to find somebody who could sand our trucks. We looked at all of our different competencies in the business, and we really focused on areas that are dirty, dangerous, and people just don't want to do. So if you can imagine, I have about 70 people that are in a booth every day, 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, that they run a DA sander. That's their job. So that's an ergonomic issue. That's just a quality of life issue that we challenge. It's hard to find somebody that wants to do that, suit up, and spend the time on their feet working with their hands to that degree. So we spent a lot of time searching out somebody that could help us with that solution. We met with a handful of different people, and everybody said there's no way we can do that, but I know somebody who can, and they pointed us to GrayMatter. So once that relationship started, we really focused on the art of the possible. So we talked to GrayMatter, and I said I really would like to sand our roofs. I just want to sand my roofs because that's an area I have to put people at height. And Arian said, I do not want to sand your roofs. I want to sand everything. First time that I've ever worked with an automation company that increased the scope of my project for me. So with that, we're going to get into some deeper dives here on some of our applications and where we've really benefited. But ultimately, being a worldwide leader in fire apparatus, we've been able to take a look at all of these other areas that we struggle to get people, we struggle with safety incidents, and apply the technology to that high mix to be able to help our deliveries and improve our timeline to the customer.
Paul, I think similar to Aaron's story, you had some difficult to reach area and difficult for people to do kind of job. You want to share a little bit about your operation?
So we call ourselves an aircraft painting company. We're really, truthfully, an aircraft preparation company, right? As in of an 8-day paint event, which is, you see a Southwest aircraft on the screen here. It would take us 8 days to strip and repaint that aircraft. The painting part of those 8 days is probably less than 20 hours of when people are actually spraying paint. Most of the work and the hardest labor is taking off the old paint. So that's by some means of chemically stripping the aluminium components. That's relatively efficient and not too labor intensive. Then the other sort of where the really hard work is the mechanical abrasion. So you see an image of a person on a wing here. That's literally done at this point in time with a DA sander, which is labor intensive, obviously. So when we looked at, we first came across GrayMatter, I think with 3M, I think brought us together. we use a lot of sandpaper, and 3M are a partner with GrayMatter. So it was immediately evident that the technology can do what they say it does. So for us, it was just figuring out where do we start on this journey. So we started on the worst part of the job, which is sanding the bottom of an aircraft wing. It's not a fun day when you walk into work at 8 o'clock in the morning and you're handed a sander and you're told, here you go, here's the bottom of the wing, you have to go and sand. So that's where we've started our journey of trying to automate that particular process of what we do. We've made it really difficult for GrayMatter, I think. We're obviously a very highly regulated industry. Aerospace in general is extremely risk averse. So we had, it was quite a journey, I think, to convince ourselves that there was no risk here in terms of potentially damaging one of these aircraft, then convincing our regulators and convincing ultimately our customers. That was an interesting journey to go on. The other, I think, thing we're making very difficult for GrayMatter is our business is high volume, fast throughput. So we're world leading in how quickly we can paint these aircraft, and that's sort of a fundamental component of our business. We'll do these in 8 days. It doesn't give you a lot of time to play around with the robot, unless you're going to go and tell your customer, well, it's going to take us a few extra days to paint your airplane, which they don't want to hear. So that's been interesting. I think trying to integrate the system while at the same time not taking a backward step from our actual rate of production.
Great. Brule was here, so one of our, SK is here, one of my co-founder, and Brule was here yesterday too, my other co-founder. So Brule is our co-founder and CTO at GrayMatter Robotics. The day, we launched the robot for the first time to work on Paul's aircraft, Brule was almost having a heart attack. That what if the robot punches through the wing of the aircraft? So that was quite something. Now, before...
I didn't know you were that worried about it, Aaron, actually, at the time.
And by the way, you guys will, those of you who register for the tour at GrayMatter Robotics later today, you'll get to see a replica of a 737 wing that we used to practice on before deploying the system at Paul's hangar. Now, before thinking about introducing autonomous systems in your manufacturing facility, maybe Drew, you can share. There was a compelling event for Riddell, right? That really urged you to think about how do you future-proof your business. Do you want to share that story?
Sure. So we knew for a while, our sanding operation was one of the most challenging to staff. We had very much high turnover, constantly training new employees, quality issues that go with it, inefficiencies, bottlenecks. So that was a challenge. I started in 2015. It was a challenge each season. The severity of the challenge was what would always change. We always got through it, but it was always a challenge. So we had started really looking at automation in about 2018. We looked a lot into automated sandblasting for 2018, 2019. Met with a few partners there, and ultimately we couldn't get to the finish line. We already kind of proved it out that we would work from a quality standpoint, but there's no ROI. Essentially, I was going to have to invest millions of dollars for this equipment, and we would save a bunch in labor, and I would just spend that all in media and energy. So there's no ROI, and couldn't go anywhere with it. I can't tell our CFO, hey, here's $3 million I need. You don't save any money, you just give me $3 million, and we should have, in theory, better quality. So it went nowhere. Then the pandemic happened, and that whole project just got put aside. And then coming out of the pandemic, our business, like most, were impacted. A lot of customers didn't play football in the fall of 2020, so 2021. So reconditioning is always a year later. So if you play football in the fall, you need reconditioning next year. So 2021 was a down year for us in reconditioning just because none of our customers played that season. But then coming out of the pandemic in 2022, things came roaring back in a big way. And we're still on this pattern right now. Participation is up, especially at the youth level. Youth football participation had declined for about a decade, with all the concussion CTE concerns. We saw a steady decline, especially at the youth level, and a little bit at the high school level, mainly at the youth. But then coming out of the pandemic, the youth trends shot way up. I think some of it is kids stayed inside for 2 years, and once they went to their parents, I want to play football, yeah, whatever it takes you to get out of the house, like, the answer was just yes. So that's been a nice little trend for us. But then with that participation coming up, our competitors are weak. We got a ton of demand in 2022, and we couldn't handle it, frankly, particularly in our U.S. facility in Cleveland, Ohio. So we failed big time in 2022. We had about 60,000 helmets that we couldn't process in our facility. And football is very seasonal. Practice starts, June, July, August. Football season doesn't wait for us. So we had to send about 30,000 helmets to our Mexico facilities to bail us out. And then there's about another 30,000 helmets we were late on. So we had customers, we're supposed to start full practice in August 1st. They had to move it back a week oftentimes because we didn't have their helmets in time, so they were waiting for us. So it was a really big failure on our end of really let our customers down there. So that really predicated us, okay, this doesn't work. This model, we knew it wasn't great. Now it truly doesn't work. We couldn't hire enough people. We hired over 100 people that year just for sanding. 60% of them churn, and we couldn't hit our volumes every day. We were working excessive overtime. We still couldn't hit our volumes. So that was really the event that said, okay, we have to change now.
Yeah. Paul, when you thought about bringing in robots, right? How did you think about the business outcome that you were looking for from the status quo to post, introduction of robots?
I suppose our journey is a little bit different in that we didn't have a burning platform where we said we have to change like today to keep doing our business. Labor is always a challenge, obviously, but we've kind of accepted that as part of the business nearly in our operating rhythm. So I would say at this stage we're in kind of experimentation mode. I think when we first looked at the hardware, the software, like you can see it does what it needs to do. So for us, this exercise is really about looking, 5-10 years into the future, accepting that, yes, we're managing our labor today, but in a decade, less people are going to want to do this job, certainly in North America. So that's really our kind of how we look at this investment, that it's not changing our business today, but if we don't do it today, we're going to be behind, basically. We also see upside in, I think we're leading our space in this respect. There's certainly nobody else in our industry doing this. Aerospace in general is very, as I said, very conservative, very slow to adopt automation. So we see, upside in that feel like we're leading the charge and being the innovators in this space. That's our outcome.
Makes sense. Aaron, I know, before introducing autonomous robots that can handle your 120,000 different combinations, right? You did dabble into automation with robotic paint. You tried some of the standard solution, traditional fixed program-based approach like the automotive. And yesterday in one of our discussions, you were sharing some of the challenges. And also previously, you shared some of the challenges around some damages that was made to some of your fire trucks because robots that run blind don't know what they're doing properly, right? Do you want to share some of those stories with the audience?
Yeah, so as I expressed a little bit earlier, the industrial automation works great on standard product. When you have the high mix, you definitely have challenges where you need to employ some additional skilled resources to be able to write those programs. So we leverage industrial automation in our welding facilities, where we have some of our chassis components that are repeatable. We focus on that to help us gain some throughput advantage there. And in those areas, we're very successful. We have robot programmers that were upskilled from being welders, so we were able to take advantage of that. And that's a success story. We dabbled in paint in 2021, where we have all of our cabs are painted with in an automated cell. But with that being said, the amount of variation that we see in our cabs should be relatively standard, but there is customization around those, which causes us to have an excessive amount of programs. So you look at a fire truck that's rolling down the road, and they're not just one color. We currently paint over 1,000 colors, 400 shades of red. So that causes some complexity, and that's not exaggeration by any means. If you ever have a chance to come to Pierce Manufacturing, you'll see our color wall. We don't have every color on the wall, but we have a vast majority of them. So funny story about that. So I have the opportunity to take fire departments out to dinner when they come. There's a Pierce experience when you buy a fire truck. We give you the Wisconsin Supper Club experience, and there's a whole bunch. They go to Lambeau Field, they do those things. But I had Charlotte in, they were buying a tiller. Their last purchase of a Pierce fire truck was in 1985, I believe. So they were a returning customer to Pierce Manufacturing. So I had the team out, and they were talking about how excited they were for their new fire truck. And I ran through the spiel on the colors. I said at the time, we had 353 shades of red. They said 354 today. So they had brought their own shade of red. So I'll digress from that. But that customization causes challenges. So my industrial automation that we currently paint with, I have a painter that we train to be a programmer. He does offline programming for us. He currently has between 3,000 and 4,000 programs that he stores that we are physically pushing into that FANUC controller to be able to paint all the variation we see. So on top of that, about 60% of my trucks are not just one color, they're two colors. So we have to paint a two-tone, which causes additional variation based on where that paint break is, and it adds that complexity. So any error in that robot program, it can cause damage. So an impact to the gun. I think right now our spray guns are about 14-week lead time, so I can't afford to take that risk, right? That would be a huge detriment to my throughput to have that on top of it, an impact to that product that we've already stuck a large amount of time into, restricting it from going through, because that cab is specifically built for the truck that it's intended to go on, and any disruption in that process will delay the customer's ability to receive that truck. So without having some sort of solution for that high mix, we were kind of at a standstill with automation. We were challenged by executive leadership to find areas to put automation in, and it's, again, like I had mentioned earlier, it's very easy to say solve a problem with automation. Just go ahead and we'll paintbrush it and buy some robots and we'll figure it out, right? So how do you do that when every part that I'm sending through it changes? That was really the problem that we were trying to solve. The kind of the next level of that, we talked a lot about data yesterday in a few of our circles. How do we leverage the data that we're getting out of our scans to help improve the quality of our process? So those are some of the things that we're really going after, of taking the solution and then building additional problem solving on top of that back into our process.
Great. So all of you had some of the other challenges which are pretty much similar. Capacity constraint, how do we future-proof our business? How do we make sure cost per unit doesn't go down, but our throughput goes up? And you saw a technology, you saw physical AI coming in, you saw physical AI paired with robots, creating these autonomous systems that can now potentially do all these operations, right? And address your high mix, high volume need, high mix, low volume need, high mix, high volume, and very large component needs. However, in that whole adoption process, okay, so you saw technology is there, three of you are visionaries, but you guys are part of very complex organizations. And I'm sure there has been a lot of internal challenges, pushback, and bringing everyone together and aligning multiple stakeholders to really bring this in, because it's a big change management. One of you want to start by sharing your journey, how it went from concept to bringing it in-house?
I mean, I can start. So I think, as Jason said, everything stays in this room, so I can complain about this a little bit. We're a private equity-backed company, so we would look at capital investment maybe a little bit differently than you guys would, in that our owners like to talk about these things but don't like to kind of put the money down sometimes. So for us, our reluctance to really get into this space in the past, even before kind of understanding what was possible, was knowing that our ownership did not have an appetite to put down millions of dollars to buy robots and sort of figure it out as we went along. As much as everybody would like to talk about future-proofing the business, that was always going to be a constraint we ran into. So that's why when we started talking with GrayMatter, the sort of the subscription-based model that you guys offered kind of unlocked that for us, where we were able to agree on a commercial deal that made sense for us. We didn't get over our skis, investing in something that we weren't sure was going to actually work. And that was, if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't have actually made any steps in automation at this point, I don't think.
I have a little bit of an opposite story to share. So we were a publicly traded company. So obviously there's very, very structured capital plans and expectations on deliveries that we managed through. And we saw some adversity to getting that subscription base into our business. There was a lot of reluctance. We're a traditional company that we would scope a project, get some quotes from integrators, and then you pick one and you apply that technology, and then you realize, you do your after action reviews and you satisfy your justification, right? That's how we operate. So going to our CFO, having discussions about the fact that I'm going to lease these robots, and he's saying, well, what do I get? Like, what do I own out of this? It was an extremely difficult conversation. It took us about 8 months. Going back and forth with our legal team, with our accounting team, to make sure that we had these things in order to be able to bring the GrayMatter subscription in-house. Ultimately, what we ended up, what kind of unlocked it for us was the fact that, one, downtime is a killer in manufacturing. The fact that the GrayMatter team was accountable for all of my maintenance, and there was agreements there for how do we recapture downtime, was extremely important to us, and definitely a selling point. Secondly, there is a fact that we're all dealing with that we talked about in depth yesterday, is that you just can't hire people. So the justification was built out on the reallocation of skilled resources. And focusing on those areas where we can automate to be able to use that labor to increase my saturation in other areas to increase my throughput. So with that justification and getting over the hurdle of the subscription base, we were able to kind of unlock the door. And I think what really put the stamp on it for us was the availability and the relationship that we built with GrayMatter. In that time, that 8 months, we slowed down. We were behind the 8 ball a little bit on where we wanted to be on our automation journey. But that time, we were able to kind of cast that relationship to ensure that we have both of our best interests in mind. That has since created replication of this technology in our other businesses. So we're a company owned by Oshkosh Corporation. We have JLG is putting in a cell. Our transport segment is looking at cells. There's other businesses within the Oshkosh umbrella that have been turned on to this after we got over that initial hurdle of that subscription.
Let's talk about facility, because so GrayMatter Robotics is the first startup I co-founded, and being a naive entrepreneur, right? At least in my head, the thought was that as soon as we have a great technology, it's going to solve all the problems in the world, right? However, reality was different. So 3 years ago, when we used to think about working with a customer, with an end user, we used to only look at problem-solution fit. Today, we look at problem-solution fit, facility readiness fit, cultural fit. Is this an organization who can adopt the solution? Financial fit, right? So let's talk about facility. Facility, IT, logistics, all of that, right? I know each of you had to go through a whole bunch of hurdles. One of you want to share your journey, your story, how you got over the change management of all that?
Yeah, from a facility aspect, our facility, we have a production Kanban flow, so we have 15 different departments throughout the reconditioning process. So we had to fit. We didn't want to change our process. We had just moved in this building, and it was about 5 years old at that point when we first met GrayMatter. We designed the facility fit our flow, so we weren't going to change things. So the robots had to fit within our current flow. Because I know we even talked early on of like, well, it has its own self-collecting dust collecting system. You can put it anywhere. We're like, no, we can't, because you don't understand. Like every department feeds in there, so I can't just stand in the cafeteria. It's not going to, even though it collect dust, it doesn't work with my flow. So we had to have the robots fit. So we had a standing room. So we looked at the room, and the GrayMatter robots, it doesn't stay in 100% of the helmet. So if you look at our helmets, it has all sorts of flex panels, weird kind of crevices, where we looked at early on that the robot can do about 90% coverage on that helmet. To get 100% coverage, it would require a tool change, and it didn't make sense for us. We're again, high volume. Every day we got to pump out 2,400 helmets through that room. So we can't be messing around, changing tools. We just need the robots to spin as fast as possible. So the robot does about 9% of that, and then we have a person hand sanding the other 10%. So before the robots, a person would sand the entire helmet, take anywhere from 6 to 10 minutes. Now the robot does that helmet in 5 minutes, and then the person does it for a minute. So speeding up the throughput, and more importantly, taking way more pressure off that employee. Instead of hand sanding a helmet, the entire day, 100 helmets, now they're just touching it up, which is way more better ergonomically for that employee. So first, from a facility, was making sure it fits. So we were able to fit it in the room without impact. We had to keep our hand sanding stations, keep our thing. So we put it right in the middle of our sanding room, where it used to be our production Kanban for the day. Now we keep the Kanban outside the room, and they only bring in what they need, right away, for that hour. Instead of having 8 hours of work in the room, there's an hour of work now. Robots fill the rest of the space up.
Paul,
yeah,
love to hear your
we're a
story
bit
of
different in
facility.
that compared to maybe typical manufacturing environments, in that everybody can picture probably an aircraft hangar. So we don't have a line as such. We have one room, essentially a large room, meaning the hangar, where the aircraft comes in, it's sanded, stripped, washed, and painted in that space. The aircraft doesn't move. So in terms of our facility integration, there was some electrical work to be done in the hangars, IT connections, relatively minor stuff. For us, it was actually figuring out how do we, I think the inherent challenge for us is actually getting access to all the components of the aircraft, and how you scale up robotics to do that. But the initial problem, not necessarily a problem, but a consideration, was just the space it takes up in our hangar. As I said, we entered this exercise not willing to take a backward step on our throughput, our production rate. So while the robot is getting to work, we still need to access every other part of the aircraft. And the physical space it takes up in the hangar was something we had to work around with regards to the lifts and other access equipment we have moving around the hangar. Not facility related, but the actual, I think what we were all surprised about was how much the aircraft moves during the process, and the challenge that represented for the robot to stay in contact. But in terms of the facility preparation, it was relatively easy to adopt, I'd say.
Yeah, like just to give everyone a little bit more context of the problem space, right? When you're working on an aircraft, every single aircraft is slightly different. None of them matches with the ideal CAD model because of the manufacturing process, the process physics, the material science of it. Different wings come in with different amount of fuel, so their vibration is very different. Their sags are very different. As you're working on one side, if you have a robot, the robot is working on one wing, let's say the right wing, and due to whatever, wind or someone else like working on the other side of the aircraft doing something else, the wing is vibrating like quite a bit. So it was a very interesting problem. And then also in this particular scenario, as you can see, like to work under the wing, under the belly, and all that, we have to look up. And all the light sources are from the top. So all the sensors often get blinded. So how do you create a technology that can be robust, that can not understand the environment and also run a very safe operation robustly, different day of the year, time of the day, while it's on a portable mobile platform that can be moved around the entire aircraft? So it was a super challenging problem, hence Riddell was having the heart attack. So Aaron, I know you guys had a lot of other challenges with the facility. You want to share any of the stories?
Yeah, we had a really interesting story. So, aligned with the other two discussions, we could not slow down our production to be able to put this automation in. So I didn't have physical space within my current facility footprint to be able to inject a robot without disrupting my entire process. So we worked around our layouts and we looked at all of our buildings within our footprint to figure out where we could do this to integrate it into our current value stream without disrupting that value stream. So where we ended up landing on caused quite a bit of facilities disruption. So we had somewhat of an annex here that was converted into an office space, a 2-story office space that was adjacent to my paint shop. So we looked at that space. It housed my computer services DT team and a subset of my design engineering team on the second floor. So we had to, on top of the lease discussion that we had to have with our CFO, we had to go to him with the fact that I'm going to tear out a mezzanine, replace about 30 people, try to find homes for them in our other offices to be able to put in these robots. So we had additional, I would say, emotional investment into the discussion that we had to be able to bring GrayMatter in and make it make sense for us. So this space did a few things for us. So as you know, industrial paint shops, we have a lot of processes in one area. So we prime, we wash, we mask, we paint. We do our base and clear coat in this area, and our booths are set up in a way that they're positively pressured to keep dust out. But any dust you introduce into a paint shop can deteriorate your quality at the end. So we were able to take this space here at a garage door to the end, and we're able to do this exterior to my process to clean up my paint shop. So we do have the dust extraction on the arms that helps us, and that captures the majority of the dust, but there is still dust created. But this allows me to monitor my queues, build that queue without disrupting that process, and be able to inject more than just the cabs that we started with, our bodies and other products from other value streams into this cell to be able to continue to maximize the utilization of these robots. On the power side, the DT side, that's standard practice for our manufacturing and facilities engineers. So there wasn't much of a toll on there. It was more of the footprint allocation within our facility, and ultimately removing office space, which can be a struggle.
And also, you guys, when you first started with our solutions, you started with 2 robots. That 2 became 4. That 4 is now becoming 7 by the end of this year. Your president wants to add, I think, 9 more by end of next year. So it has been a constant struggle for you to think about which applications to choose, go next. How do you go? Because your objective was to double your throughput across the full facility. How do you get twice as much fire trucks on a weekly basis out? How did you go about planning out that sequence of different application? And by the way, when we started our journey as a company about 5.5, 6 years ago now, we started with sanding as an application. And this fine gentleman over here pushed us into doing other application, because doing just one application in a factory does not unlock the full factory, and they kept on pushing us to do adjacent applications so that we can help them unlock end-to-end the full factory. So Aaron, how did you go about planning out the sequence of applications, sequence of phases, and this game of constant moving puzzle pieces around a facility?
Yeah, so has anybody read the book, The Goal? So Theory of Constraints. We took a look at our constraints, and we wanted to make sure that we could exploit those constraints, and that's where we started. So I said, what at the time, sanding of cabs and bodies was my constraint. It is no longer my constraint, which is really good, right? But that's where we started. And again, our scope was extremely narrow when we went after this, which was opened up by Arian and Brill and the team to make sure that we were not missing any piece to maximize that utilization. So from the initial project that we were working on of sanding these cabs, we brought the GrayMatter team in to do factory walks. They actually helped us with some time study, documentation, and really understanding our process end for end. And not just in our paint facility. We walked, the team spent time in our welding, fabrication, and our final assembly to understand the impacts of the automation on the entire business, to be able to pinpoint those areas and understand where the competencies of GrayMatter lie at the current state, to be able to apply that. And then we looked for replication at our other facilities in Florida, in Tennessee, where we manufacture these trucks. So from there, we prioritize based on the benefit and the maturity of the technology that we're trying to apply to this process. So we took the gains that we had with just sanding, and we looked at other components that had like geometry, like surfaces, and we're going after those. Beyond that, we looked at the next challenges for us. So the next challenges had a safety aspect to it, so grinding on the cabs, grinding the weld reinforcement down to get them ready for a Class A finish was a challenge. So the team, we posed that to GrayMatter, and they started working on it. We actually shipped a cab out to California here, so to be able to practice on and make sure that they're understanding what our problem is clearly before they apply the technology to that. And that's really one of the problems that we struggle with in manufacturing with integrators of industrial automation is you go to them with the problem, they scope it, generally your scope narrows a little bit, and then you get delivered, anecdotal at best here, but about a 70 to 80% product is what you end up having to sign off on based on timelines and capabilities. Right, and then you work internally to be able to engineer that to the capability that you need to satisfy what you have. So with that being said, this problem gets reversed with the GrayMatter application because the workshops that we do ahead of time help prove out all those items and sometimes increase the capability of what you thought you were going to do with it. So we started with just cabs. Now we're doing bodies. We can do components in here, different doors and things like that we didn't even dream that we could do or wanted to do with this cell.
Speaking of, EON is about age of now, right? All the AI, advanced AI technologies, the physical AI. Yesterday, Jonathan gave an amazing talk on that. So what we have found at GrayMatter Robotics is that to drive real business outcome, technology is just one piece of the puzzle. There's so much other components to it to drive a real business outcome, especially in an environment like manufacturing. Drew, our journey has been quite interesting. It started with, let's say, 2 years ago when we deployed the first 3 or 4 robots. They were producing about 300 helmets a day. And now you guys are doing 1,200 helmets a day. And there's 3 more robots, but the helmets per robot has increased dramatically. And that has been quite a bit of a journey. Do you want to share that journey and how did you make it happen?
Yeah. So we started off with 4 robots in our initial deployment. We were just getting started, figuring this out. So doing about 300 helmets per day between the 3 robots over 2 shifts there. And it was definitely a learning experience on both ends. Mm-hmm. In terms of getting that quality finish. Because with our helmets, we have about same number of paints, 1,000 different paints, different layers. Some helmets, 12 layers of paint, 2 layers of paint. Some helmets been painted 10 years in a row, and you never got all that. You don't get all the paint off, so you're just painting over it, and you sand it's like a tree. See all the rings, you can kind of tell how old the helmet might be. It's pretty interesting. But every helmet's different coming in, so it was a lot of back and forth with GrayMatter of a little more pressure here, and we developed some recipes around that because we saw not every helmet's created equally there. So it was pushing GrayMatter on their side, but also kind of pushing our team of how do we manage the robots. There was definitely some resistance, and in a day, 2,400 finished helmets out of that room that's what's needed. So we'd have, with our production supervisor managers, times where we still need a lot of people in that room. We no longer need 55 people, we still need 35 people in that room. So we need people to do the job and to get a completed product. But we found challenges where, okay, I'm missing people today. I'm pulling the robot operator to finish more helmets. And it's like, no, don't let the robots keep running. Let's not, and let's think about in the big picture. The robots, keep feeding them. Don't sacrifice the robot productivity. You sacrifice the finishing, because you're never gonna get that robot capacity back. If we have an abundance of helmets are 90% done. Okay, next day we can quickly touch them up as people get back to work. So it was a lot of kind of going back and forth how we managed the campaign. We had to manage our process differently. So that was a lot as we get more throughput and really starting to get KPIs. At first, we didn't have great KPIs, and then working with GrayMatter, we get a daily dashboard now by shift, by hour, by minute. So we know each robot, who's the operator, how many they're doing. Now we're posting those metrics up and driving the accountability and driving us to keep a robot spinning. No matter what, let's keep a robot spinning is what we call it. And that's so you can see our throughput continues to increase. And this year, we've always done it on 2 shifts. Over next month here, we're going to add a 3rd shift, and our goal is to get to 1,800 helmets per day out of the robots this year, which would essentially be about full capacity. Because we do 2,400, but not every helmet is painted. A lot of the youth ones, they're not painted, so we have to buff them real quick. So we can get to that full 2,400 with the robots doing 100% of the paint with that 3rd shift this year, which is our goal. So hopefully a year from now, we'll be looking at 1,800 on this timeline.
All right, let's do it. Let's talk a little bit about people. At each of your facility, the operators have been the biggest champion, right, of driving the success for the robot. And some of these operators, they used to do these jobs by hand, very hard on their body, extremely tedious, extremely ergonomically challenging. How did you get them motivated to become robot operator to begin with, right? And how do you see the shift in culture and the mindset?
I can take this one. So with our process with our employees was transparency. So once we signed the agreement with GrayMatter, there's about 9 months from signing agreement to when the robots were actually going to deploy. So we were transparent with our employees throughout. So we met with all of our standing room employees. Hey, here's what's happening. Here's why we're doing it. Here's what the robot can't do. Here's what it can do. So we showed the videos of some demos we did at GrayMatter, understood that, okay, it can't do 100% of the helmet, so we're going to still need employees in this room to finish the helmet, but now instead of you sanding a helmet for 10 minutes, it's a 1-minute job. So I think that was really key with our employees, because people fear change, especially when you talk about automation. First thing you think, am I losing my job here? And with us, we were always, especially in that department, we got 50-50 perm to temp ratio. So instead of needing 55 employees, now I need 35 employees. That 50% temp ratio, now I have very little temp. So none of the full-time employees were impacted by this. Now their job changes now. Now they're not saying a helmet from start to finish, but no one lost their jobs because of these robots. And that was important to be transparent throughout. Here's what's happening. Here's how it will impact you. Here's what will not impact you. I'm really adding that human element to it. Like we were successful doing that.
Yeah, and one thing I think that inspired our team quite a lot is, I forgot the name of the gentleman, but you had an operator who used to sand by hand before, who was injured and who had retired, and you folks brought him back to become a robot operator. Yep. That was a very inspiring story.
Yeah, Chad, yep.
Chad, yes, yeah.
I suppose we talked about that a lot at the start of the journey, and we selected to launch the first robot at the facility that we believed was had the most suitable management team to actually take this on and integrate it, and that's a little bit of a soft scale of assessing the teams, but generally like in Spokane, Washington, it's a bit of a younger demographic in the management team. They've done some innovative stuff before in different parts of the business. So that was our first, I think, hurdle, our first way we approached this. So we picked the facility, picked the management team best suited to integrate it. At the operator level, there wasn't a lot of convincing to do. I mean, we were pretty transparent, same way, sort of telling people, look, nobody's losing their job here. It's simply trying to make the job better. It's more of an ergonomic exercise as opposed to a labor sort of swap exercise. So it's been well embraced, yeah. Certainly it was interesting at the start, like the novelty effect was very real. Everybody's very excited about it. That's worn off a little bit. And now I suppose it's a good problem to have for us, where our team are so set on production rates that the challenge that I suppose maybe I have or the senior team have is there will become a point in time where we'll have to accept that give our team some latitude to take a backward step, because we have seen in the past where, recently, right, if Southwest are late giving us an airplane, what was an 8-day event now needs to be done in 7 days, and in those instances, the team are saying, let's get the robot out of the way and let's just do this ourselves. So that's something in the next 6 months we probably need to, give some firmer guidance on, and take a little bit of a step back to fully integrate this. But it hasn't been a problem so far in terms of people's reception to it.
Right.
I have similar journey as the other two conversations. It started out with a little bit of resistance to automation. We were lucky enough to have a little bit of automation already in our facilities. So there still is that resistance of pride in the job that you do. But on the flip side, we had a lot of people we hire painters and we put them in our paint shop. So we have skilled painters who signed up to be painters, and we rotate them through sanding to help with the ergonomics and the stress. And so we're able to appropriately allocate those people out. And when we got them outsold it, or when we told them that obviously they would have to sand less, then it turned into a prove it conversation, and we did. Where we're sanding 80 to 90% of the cabs and bodies that we run through this. So with that, we're able to get more of our painters in booths with guns in their hand, doing what they love to do, what their career is, which definitely helped the situation and the adoption. To the point that we've picked specific individuals based on their ability to lead and ability to adopt the technology to be champions of these cells. We actually have one individual that has a very good relationship with the support team at GrayMatter Robotics, to the point that we're going through facility, kind of some factory of the future discussions and some facility reorganizations. We're just finishing up 26,000 square foot expansion where we're going to be installing additional GrayMatter cells. One of our cells has to move into that facility to complete the value stream, and that operator has ultimately told us that if he does not move with that cell, he will quit. So it's how much of a level of ownership that this individual has for that cell, which is really unique. And ultimately, when these cells are not running and we have to run these components by hand, we feel a lot of complaints. So a little bit of that proof is in the pudding there of the opportunity that we've captured with GrayMatter.
Yeah. So that operator, his name is Dax, and Doug and Adrian is gonna love Dax because he's just running, heavy metal, black metal, death metal all day long with the robots. And the two robots he operates he named them. One is called Slayer, another one is called Ozzy. Now, what really resonated among all three of you is that end of the day, to bring adoption of this kind of new technology and really do the change management, what really worked is sort of an orchestration of a team with humans, robots, and AI, and the right combination. And what also came across that it has been a journey, and that ratio has been shifting. How do you bring the human and robots and AI together is what's making all this adoption of this kind of technology successful and driving the business outcome. Now, with that said, later today we have, as Jason mentioned, we have a tour at GrayMatter Robotics. So there will be a bus leaving here at 1:15 from the lobby. We just moved to this 100,000 square feet facility. We just did a grand opening last week. So we are very excited to have you all who registered for the tour. So excited to show you all the different capabilities and technology and how we are bringing physical AI to real world with all these fine gentlemen and many other industries and end users. So really excited by that. That said, I'd love to open the floor for the audience for questions.
Really awesome story. So cool to hear the real friction points of bringing good technology into real use. One question I have for all of you is, in the process of going from a vision to a trusted execution, what were the key inflection points for building trust in the partnership between the customers and the provider?
I can take that one first. So I think for us, it was the journey. We didn't sort of set out one day to say, how do we automate our business? GrayMatter came across our radar. it was interesting. I think you guys sent us some material, and you look at that, and you see, I think it was actually the Riddell robot, and you go, well, it's obviously standing and doing something. And then we went to the factory in your old facility, walked around, and again, like the validation is self-evident. I remember you put a component in front of the robot, you pressed the button, and it started doing it, and I was like looking for where the strings were, who was behind the curtain. So that moved us to the point of where we got serious about it, like really thinking about, okay, if we can reach a price point that works for us, like we'll from a cost point of view, we'll allocate that cost. And then it was really the conversation about, we just can't damage an airplane with this. Like if we launch one of these things and it damages an airplane, like it's obviously extremely costly. Our reputation is in tatters. My personal reputation is in the trash can, and it's the end of our automation journey for 5 or 10 years till everybody forgets about it. So it was Brual particularly like walking me and the team through, but this is what we're going to do. Like this is how the technology addresses that concern. This is the additional layers of tech that we're going to put over the system to stop that happening. And that was the final thing, I think, where we said, okay, let's go and do it. So they were the various sort of checkpoints as I think back on it, how we got to implementing the system.
Yeah, I would say additionally, some of the items that the inflection points in our journey were at that point of we were ready to invest. We were ready to invest in capital improvements in our business, and really the key point that we had to overcome was that going from a CapEx project to a lease and getting our team on board with it. So really understanding and having clear vision for what this technology brings to us, the opportunity there, and the ROI on it to be able to justify that. That was probably the biggest point with us. And again, what really solidified it was the partnership and the ability to go through that journey, the time invested by GrayMatter to be able to get there, understanding that there's a risk that we may not do this. But being in our factory, knowing our processes, to ensure that our justifications were solid, that was probably the biggest moment that we had to really go into this together, and it really galvanized that relationship.
Yeah, my story is very similar to Paul's story. So really, GrayMatter came out to our facility, went out to their facility, really had validations. Actually seeing the robots stay in their helmets and be like, yeah, this actually works. And then having the conversations with Arjen and Brual, and really just feeling comfortable. Okay, these guys know what they're doing. Like very intelligent, very bright. Like because they're a startup. At the time, you were a little over a year in, 15 employees, very small. So it was certainly a risk on our end to go to our CFO and CEO and be like, okay, we got the startup. We think it's a really good idea. It's we got to sign this contract. It's for 3 years. We're on the hook for a lot of money here. But ultimately, we did have a better strategy. The other strategy was, okay, we can just ask HR to try to keep staffing for a position we can't staff for and hope for the best. And our CEO's, one of her famous sayings is, hope is not a business strategy. So that was, the alternative was to keep hoping that we could find people that we weren't successful in. So that certainly helped kind of push the case along.
Thank you.
I've got a quick question about how does GrayMatter, I guess two questions. One is, do you work with system integrators when you work with GrayMatter? Or do you work directly with GrayMatter?
Yeah, on the Riddell side, we work directly with GrayMatter.
Yeah, same.
So then the second question that I had was, as you look at like the range of automation that has been deployed over the last couple of years, is there something different about the technology or different about the approach that GrayMatter has taken that maybe portends more automation in the future as machines become more performant? But I'm just curious, are we at an inflection point for some of the technologies that you expect to see coming into manufacturing?
Well, that's a question that we've asked GrayMatter literally in the last 6 weeks to answer for us, basically. Again, we're kind of early in the stage of adopting this, but it's all looking like it's going in the right direction. And we were talking about like the next steps, and then I think collectively thought, well, let's think a bit bigger than that. So we were thinking about like, okay, the next robot and which part of the aircraft. But what I think we're engaging on is asking GrayMatter to like plot out the future, like our whole process. What can you automate in that process? What's the commercial case for it, et cetera, et cetera. So we're on that journey right now, yeah. So next year we'll have the results and tell you what that looks like.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, on our end too, now we started with the sanding, which was the most obvious one for us. We want to keep going, and we're trying to decide what is next. But overall, we're a risk-averse organization, been in business for 96 years, probably for that reason. And I think with adopted technology, you can't miss, because that can really set you back. If you move forward with the next thing, you whiff, good luck trying to get the next thing going. So we want to, as we go through and figure out what is next for us, it's important that we feel like we're not just going to throw as much stuff at the wall and invest millions of dollars and hope it works. Like, it's got to work, because if it doesn't work, it can really set you back on this journey we're on the automation side.
The first part of your question was around what's different about GrayMatter. So I cut my teeth in industrial automation at the beginning of my career, and the GrayMatter team gives me a hard time for this. But so when you think about industrial, traditional industrial automation, you have some very sophisticated rigid fixtures. Everything is precisely located to increase your repeatability, right? And the tolerancing of the components coming in, that all matters. The tolerancing of your jigs and fixtures, that all matters. So when you look at what GrayMatter does is what really blew my mind, and what kind of got us going on this journey is the fact that I put parts in front of it. I don't have to have rigid fixtures. I don't have to have a ton of investment time and engineering into these fixtures. I can put my part in front of this robot, and it does it. And it just, coming from the flip side of that, really attracted us. That is the ultimate sign that you can accept any of our variation. If I can just move that part 5 feet, it's going to take me longer to scan. I can find ways to control that to reduce the scan time, but that signified that they can handle the variation that we're going to throw at them. So that's what's really different about GrayMatter and why we're so invested in moving forward with them.
One of the issues that we talked about with the challenges with embodied AI yesterday was about capabilities. And something that I think is really interesting is when you think about robotics and the future of robotics, it's like it has to be able to replace a whole person. It needs to be able to replace a whole process. And what I thought was really interesting about what you guys were saying is it doesn't replace the whole process. It doesn't fix the entire plane. It doesn't refurbish the entire helmet. It does sanding, and even that, it does part of sanding. It does the 90% of sanding. And so I'm curious, like, what you guys did a really good job of was managing up and saying, up and down the value chain, it's not going to do everything, but it's going to be able to replace one small part of a process that's really painful. And so I think, how did you guys think about that process of being able to manage, up and down the value chain, of being able to say, robotics doesn't have to solve all of our problems today. We need to start small. We need to de-scope this in many ways and tackle one small challenge, and that can lead to other automations and other capabilities. But how did you get past that initial hurdle of being able to appropriately scope the problem for leadership to say, it's okay to just take this one small part for now, rather than we're not going to adopt any automation until it can refurbish an entire plane or refurbish an entire helmet?
Yeah, on our end, and it's not just leadership, but it goes all the way down to the operator level. Because there's definitely resistance, particularly in the beginning, from our operators. It can't do this, or it doesn't do a good job on this helmet, it's chipping and peeling. And a lot of just kind of redirecting the conversation. Okay, let's focus on what it can do. It can do most of the job very well, repetitively all day. It shows up to work. We're not having to work Saturdays because the robot's working. So a lot of it is just sort of redirecting. Okay, let's focus on what it can do well, and do more of that. So yeah, this helmet has layers of paint, chipping and peeling. The person really struggled with that helmet too. let's, there's another 100 helmets in the bin. Let's grab the other helmet and just do the other 99 helmets, and we can take this one helmet off the sandblaster. So a lot of people are like just a lot of resistance to change in general, and want to point out early on what it can't do, and it can't do everything, and it just kind of redirect that narrative and let's focus on what it can do, because it can do a lot of things really well that we need help with.
Yeah, I think when we first started talking, one of the sales people with GrayMatter produced this lovely ROI document based on sort of perceived labor cost savings, material cost savings, and I very quickly kind of threw that in the trash, because it would have made it much easier to just pull the trigger on the whole exercise. And like as a business, and we're chasing a sort of an EBITDA return, obviously, we would actually like it to be more of a trade-off, but we don't see it at this point as being a direct labor cost savings, and we've entered as in replacing employee, right? So actually, managing, reducing your headcount per se, but there's enough in this to say, well, it's going to make the job better and easier, from a sort of an ergonomic point of view, from an employee experience point of view, that it makes total sense, even if we get that return. It's something that's going to be more of a challenge as we look to the future and sort of further investment in this space. We will run up against that in a more robust way, I think, not being able to point to those savings. But at the same time, if we weren't on this early stage journey, you'd never get to that stage either. So that's how we've looked at it, really, from just improving the employee experience at this point.
I'd like to add to that the employee experience and getting over the hump, some of the negative narratives around automation that we deal with, just out of some tenured workforce and things like that they like to prove that do the old the man versus machine type item, like I can do a better job than the robot. So we had to overcome that in real time, and on top of it, with our executive leadership having conversations about the fact that why won't it do the other 10%? So we went after that with it can do the additional 10% or maybe another 5% of the fire truck cab if we design it differently. So we're in the middle of cutting in some design changes right now that are going to allow us to sand more of the cab and create a better end product for our customer. Additionally, we had to overcome some quality challenges that were covered up by our manual operators. So if you've ever painted anything before, you know that there's a technique to it, and you can get runs and sags and things like that in your paint. So when we onboard new employees, we put them in our primer cells to learn, because that's not my finished paint, and you can fix that before you get your base and clear coat on. So we put these primed cabs in front of our robot. Now we're seeing these sags and these runs that are in our primer that we had to correct. So we uncovered a quality issue by implementing the robots. So what we did is we had to go back and do additional training, do additional quality checks into the process. So we're starting to build more quality into our process that was previously covered up by human beings, taking more time. There's a ton of hidden rework within our process that we start peeling back on, and we become more efficient.
All right, Jason is giving me signal. We are 7 minutes over time, so I'd love to really thank our panelists for sharing their insights and experience and the journey with us. So